Woodard and Jason Wheeler, who are in Austin, joining us via video call. Wow, you're together.
Look at
Both
that.
of you.
Yes, we're sharing one set of earbuds. Do you see this? We each have one.
Yeah. You know, and Jason came up with the genius idea. I've been holding my phone out on my arm for hours at a time, it feels like. And Jason came up with the idea to, raise a stand and put it up there. So we're in good shape now.
So what are you guys
Can you hear
hearing?
us?
So what are you guys hearing there?
Nothing. It's been crickets for quite some time here. It's been
Crickets.
Literal crickets. There are a lot of crickets here in the Capitol. I tweeted out about this earlier. You just see them all over the place.
It rained in Austin, as it did in Dallas for the first time in quite a while, and that just meant an invasion of crickets inside the Capitol.
But we've had figurative crickets as well. We're more than 6 hours now into deliberations by this Senate jury, and nothing so far. And again, they'll be sticking around until at least 8 o'clock tonight. They could decide to go further than that. I'm dying to see if they end up still here on Sunday night and the lieutenant governor saying that he would sequester them in that case and they'd sleep in their offices.
I kind of wondered, you guys probably have talked about some of the, it's hard to call them jury instructions, but that's sort of what it felt like to them. And they talked about you cannot have your cell phones, you cannot have computers, you cannot have laptops, you cannot have a staffer inside that room during deliberations. And so from my perspective, I thought, well, that's going to push them along to go a little faster. But here we are, 6:15. They started deliberating right about noon. Of course, I don't know if they broke for lunch. But anyway, I was sort of expecting that we might have an answer tonight because in my head I was thinking, Friday Night Lights, Saturday college football. Also, it is Rosh Hashanah, and so there may be some members of the Jewish faith who wanted to be home with their family. We're in services tonight and tomorrow morning, but here we are approaching sundown, and we've heard nothing.
And one other thing, Tanya, real quickly. I am, and I don't know how many of these senators are going to be in the mood to stick around after a verdict is announced and after the vote is announced. I don't know how many of them are going to be sticking around to sort of walk through the process of what happened here. And everybody here is wishing that they were sort of a fly on the wall in that room. And
or a cricket on the floor.
Yeah, or a cricket on the floor, although a lot of those haven't fared so well. They're not doing so great on the floors. And so, I think a lot of us are just, dying to know what's happening in that room. And if the senators are not really in the mood to talk a whole lot afterwards, do we get that full picture? But there is this little stipulation down in all of these rules that they came up with for this trial. And it says that a senator, when they go out to the floor and they cast their vote, they've got to do it without saying anything. They just write down what they think and it gets
yay
read,
or nay.
and then yay or nay. But for 72 hours after that vote, they can still take their full written comment about what happened, what they thought, whatever, and give that to the clerk, and then it becomes part of the official record and goes into the journal. So within 3 days after whatever the verdict is, we might be reading some interesting narratives about all this.
Yeah. And I think, so many times when we're watching even a criminal trial, you try to read into, well, if it's taking longer, what does that mean for the jury? Is that good or bad for the prosecution or the defense? And, I don't know. I don't know in this instance.
We've been talking about that all afternoon, and we can't really come to a decision on who does this benefit here.
No.
And a lot of people had talked about this before today. Of course, Ken Paxton showed up on that very first day when the trial began. He was here for the morning. Lunchtime hit. We didn't see him again after that. The House questioned that. The House managers, the prosecution questioned that. They looked in the rules and they were like, well, lo and behold, it says he has to be here at 9 a.m. and enter a plea. And then it doesn't look like it says he has to be here anymore after that. But then there he was again today as closing arguments were being read.
And you were inside the gallery. I was out here near the rotunda sort of watching things and manning our camera, but you were inside and you said you could read some body language.
Yeah, he was sitting there, he was listening, he was very attentive to what was being said by both sides in the closing arguments. Our photographer actually said it looked like he was timing how long they were taking because each side only had 60 minutes to give their closing arguments. He looked a little tired to me, but that's probably to be expected. I think we all look a little tired after these past couple of weeks. I just thought it was interesting that he was here today, especially if he was not required to be here today. What does that say? Is that, signaling to the jury that, yes, I do take this seriously? Some people have criticized that he hasn't been here for his own trial. And what message does that send to these jurors who, by the way, are also senators? And they've been through a whole legislative session. They've been through some special sessions. These are part-time legislators. They have actual jobs that they're not able, to necessarily get to, and they still have more special sessions ahead. So, they might not be in the best mood having to sit through this trial, and he wasn't here for much of it. And there was some conjecture that maybe he would show up on the final day if he thought that he had the votes for acquittal. Again, that's just speculation, people saying that he probably wouldn't show up if he saw that it wasn't going to go his way. All of it's just speculation, though, just like we've heard a lot of speculation that they're going to come back immediately, or no, it's going to take them 4 days. Nobody really knows.
I don't think there is any way to know. And I was frankly not surprised to see him today. I think that his attorneys, based on what I've heard from legal experts, would want him there. You can point to him and say, we're here defending this guy. We back him up. We think there's no evidence. He is ready and willing and can't wait to return to his job. And so I think that's why you would want him there. I could also see reasons why you wouldn't want him there during testimony in terms of, if you just glance the wrong way, or you roll your eyes, or you make the wrong facial expressions, we'd all be trying to read the tea leaves the whole time had he been there. So I could, in terms of talking to some of the legal experts, I understood the decision not to have him there. I think the question is, what are the senators having for dinner?
I talked about that with somebody earlier, because obviously they've got to order in.
Yeah.
And we were, maybe it's because we were hungry here at the Capitol. And so we were like, what could they be ordering in? And, we're kind of going through this and wondering what their per diem is. Do they have a per diem? But yeah, it looks like they're going to be sharing at least one dinner in these deliberations. We don't know.
Is it pizza? Will
they be having breakfast together too, and then another dinner, and maybe another?
Right.
Nobody knows at this point. But you got the sense there was kind of an interesting buzz in the room. First of all, when we got to the closing arguments, that room just felt electric in there, and boy, those crickets were loud, and I'm not kidding. Even inside the Senate chambers, but the people in there were buzzing as well. And then it got really quiet during part of the closing arguments, especially when Representative Leach was up. It just felt like the whole room just got heavy and shut down.
And I felt like also when Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick began, as I called it earlier, sort of the jury charge, that felt as if we all understood the gravity of the moment, and I mean, we had just been through, almost whiplash from how different those closing arguments were. You had the brash, loud Tony Busby, and then you had the more methodical, surgical Andrew Murr, and then you had Jeff Leach come in and just give that really impassioned, personal testimony almost. And then to follow that up with Dan Patrick describing, like I said, sort of the gravity of the moment. I don't know. It did feel like you had this swing of emotions, and when they went in to deliberate, it was serious. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that I expected to feel that at that moment.
Yeah, you almost expected a relief among the senators, but you didn't get that feeling. It felt weighty in there. And I will say, before they took off and left the room there, when Dan Patrick was giving all of the instructions and so forth, at the end, it was almost like a judge looking over the glasses moment, like, take as long as y'all need, really. You'll be here for this hour and these days and these days. But if you go into Sunday night, I'm really considering that you're going to have to stay under the dome until we get this thing done. It was almost that look like, then it's going to really be time. It's time to wrap this up.
Nobody wants to sleep on the cot or the couch.
Right. And this does have to come to a conclusion. There is no mistrial here. It's got to come to a conclusion. And, interesting thing, and I know this has been discussed by some people, it's not something that can be undone and clawed back. The governor, if Ken Paxton is convicted, the governor cannot just come in and pardon him. That's not possible in a case like this.
Right, because it's not a criminal proceeding.
Right.
It is ultimately
a political.
It's political.
That's all it is.
Yeah, and for people who don't necessarily know how to distinguish because they've been following a lot of the rules of criminal procedure, I say the most interesting way of looking at that is to look at the jury. This is not your typical jury. You think about the lobbying that has been done up to this day to get them to go one way or the other. There have been ads that have been run in some of their districts targeting them. Donations have been made. And usually when you sit on a jury, you don't go in and think, well, depending on if I vote for guilt or innocence, I may or may not have a job for much longer after that. So it is very much political. It is very much a different animal than any of the rest of us are used to if we've been to jury duty.
Well, and generally when you're on a jury, you don't vote on motions. I mean, that just there, that's very unusual. There's nothing about this that is typical or normal, although it has some of the trappings of a criminal trial. And you wouldn't normally have a presiding judge that's not a lawyer. So it's all the things.
I'm curious, Bud and Bernadine, can you guys hear us?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just curious. I know, Bud, you've talked about this, and I'm sure, Bernadine, you've had conversations, but based on the votes that were taken during the motions early on day one, you know, the senators, the Republican senators who said, yes, I want to go ahead and go forth with this trial and not end things right now. Who are you keeping your eyes on the most?
Well, there were 6 to 8 senators who, depending on the motion, who wanted to discontinue the trial. I think that told you a little bit about who was staunchly in Ken Paxton's corner. I think since then, there's probably been one more who's joined him. It's the senator from Midland, and Senator Sparks from Midland probably is staunchly with him. So I think we probably have a core of 7 to 8, but I'm not sure he has the 9th or 10th. I've said several times today that the senators to watch are probably Senator King from Weatherford Parker County, Senator Flores from San Antonio. They both have a law enforcement background, so it'll be interesting to see how they respond to the attacks on law enforcement. And I'm not sure that those attacks on law enforcement worked well for Tony Buzbee the way the votes fall. There are a couple other senators. The Twitter sphere seems to think that Kelly Hancock from Tarrant County has a swing vote. I wouldn't think he would be suspect to flip is what I'm trying to say. But I think that there are a few senators right in the middle that we're definitely watching the most.
I agree with you on that Tarrant County point there, Bud, but you know as well as anybody covering that county forever and a day that that county's an interesting animal politics-wise, especially in recent years. And so you wonder how much of that is being calculated, by all of these senators with their districts.
I'm just still not sure how long of a memory voters would have on this. I'm not 100% sure that people would lose their jobs because they voted one way or another. However, they could get a primary opponent, and that is a whole other beast. And
potentially a very well-funded primary opponent, just depending on who is behind that. So I'm sure that all that calculus is being done by each one of them, which again, points out what a different kind of trial this is, when that's part of perhaps your decision making.
Right.
Yeah, in fact, Bud and Bernadine and I were talking about that earlier, about how that very issue, and both of them were saying that they actually thought that these senators would survive that they would be able to power through it.
It all blows over by March, and the senatorial districts are much larger than House districts, so it's much tougher to attack an incumbent in a senatorial district. They have more money. They've gone around. They've gone to all the chicken fried steak dinners and Kiwanis clubs and pancake suppers and everything else, and they've just had a lot of time to get to know people all around these gigantic districts that they represent.
Well, and also there are going to be more issues that they're going to have to battle over, such as, remember, you have the voucher issue that's coming up potentially in October. So by the time this is over, I think that the senators, their voters, the constituents will be looking at other issues.
I wanted to
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Just some people here were talking about how, we're sort of in the throes of election season here again. There's fundraising to be done. There's events to attend. And because of that, they were thinking that, well, this thing's probably going to wrap up pretty quickly because they've still got, special sessions ahead, perhaps, maybe multiples. And before you know it, we're to the primaries, and they may want to get some campaigning in or some fundraising in, or at least be seen in some places. And so they were, surmising that, maybe that would mean that we get to a quick verdict, but, who knows if any of that's true. Again, it's all just speculation until we finally see it all play out. One thing I was interested in, though, today, when those closing arguments were being given, they were referring back to previous testimony, especially the prosecution. It was showing on those senators' screens. They were looking down. They were paying attention. And I saw a lot of them with their legal pads out during those closing arguments, taking lots of notes. And so you wonder, so many of them are attorneys. You wonder, when they get behind closed doors, again, a totally different kind of jury, are they sort of presenting their own version of the case to try to convince their fellow senators?
And I wonder too what kind of pontificating might be going on. I mean, you have people who love to talk and love to hear themselves talk, or they wouldn't be in the positions that they're in. And so,
it's like a room full of Tanya Isers. I mean, it's nuts.
Oh, please! What about a room full of Jason Wheelers?
Know anything about that? That sounds horrible, though.
Let's just say room full of Jason Whiteleys. He's not here to defend himself, so let's blame that.
You can tell we're all getting tired because we're starting to get.
I don't know what to think.
Starting to get tired. I mean, we are tired.
This is turning into a cream pie fight here. I'm not sure what to think about this.
Oh, mercy.
Oh, gosh, guys. Well, it'll be good to see y'all on the other side of this. No
It
matter
will be
how
good
it turns
to
out.
see-
So
It'll be good to see daylight after this.
I
Somebody
know.
just came in a few minutes ago. It's really weird, and I'm sure all of you have been in the Capitol, covering things. It's a really weird place. I mean, it's a beautiful place, it really is. But it's got this lighting. It's got this really dim lighting, and
You feel like it's like 8 p.m. 24 hours a day.
You're drawn to this middle part here. You don't see a lot of exterior windows and such. And so you forget that it's daylight outside. You forget that you're on Earth. You know what I mean? And somebody came in and said, it's really nice outside right now. And I was like, well, yeah, outside still exists and it's daylight.
I'm thinking I'm pretty low on vitamin D right now.
So what are these senators feeling like?
Well, who knows? I did wonder that. There are so many different rooms in the Capitol complex. I don't know. None of us know exactly where they are right now. Can they see the light of day? Can they see that it's a beautiful evening outside and they want to get out and enjoy it? Or are they inside a room and they've lost track of time too?
Jason, Teresa, if you can still hear me, I hate to break it to you, but there are photos of Senator Shortner out taking a walk around the Capitol grounds. So he's out getting some daylight. Senator Nichols has gone up to his office, but Senator Shortner's out having a little stroll.
and
Do we know when those were taken?
Do what?
Do we know when those were taken?
I can go back and look at it. It looked like it was just a few moments ago.
And they can't deliberate without them all being in the room, right? I mean, at least that's normally how it is with a jury. Normally, they all have to be in the room in order to deliberate.
I don't know that answer.
Well, you know what? These are bendable rules.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've learned that.
They voted on their own rules.
I know. I mean, they weren't supposed to. If I remember correctly, I think that the rules originally said they could not have their phones with them on the floor of the Senate gallery, and I could see people flipping through their phones while I was in there watching just yesterday. So as I said, maybe we've got a little bit of wiggle room here.
Well, that's the way it is when you vote on your own rules.
Yeah,
too,
it's true. It's true. Yeah.
I want to vote on my own rules.
Yeah. Jason, we need to start a rules committee.
Why can't we do that? just you and me.
That's right.
We're going to put the rules, Tanya.
We'll let Teresa be on that committee with us. She can be the chairperson.
I'll join.
No, Teresa's way too responsible to be a part of that.
I think I'd be a good rule maker because I'm a silly rule follower. That's my problem.
See, that's our problem. That's why we wouldn't want you there.
I know. I would be sitting in that room deliberating and never take a bathroom break because I didn't think I was supposed to because it wasn't in the rules. That's
aren't rules made to be broken?
They are.
I know.
That's how I approach life.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, guys. Well, appreciate y'all joining us. I'm sure we'll talk again So
Yeah, well, let's see, 6:30.
We
so.
may
All
talk again for days.
we could. All right.
Thank you.
We'll see y'all soon.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all. Good to see you.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
All right.